Welcome to the Houston Apartment Association's Expert Exchange, where we address real questions with expert answers. My name is Morgan Taylor. I'm the editor of Abode magazine here at HAA, and I am your moderator with our host, Betsy Marshall of Allied Orion Group. Today is Wednesday, February 10th, and today's topic is on the new pool codes. Before we turn it over to our host, I'm going to review some housekeeping items. Thank you again for joining us today. For our viewers, please ask any questions that you may have in the Zoom chat box or in the comments via Facebook Live. Once we get through the questions we curated, we will get to your questions. This is a micro webinar, so we're going to try to keep the session to our 30-minute time window. A quick disclaimer, we are not public health experts nor attorneys. This webinar is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. No member should act on the basis of any material contained in the webinar without obtaining proper legal or other professional advice specific to their situation. Please consult your management company or property owner to address specific issues and to form your own company guidelines. With that, I'll turn it over to our host, Betsy Marshall. Oh, Betsy, got on mute.
There we go. My name is Betsy Marshall, and I'm happy to be your host today. We're going to be talking about the new pool codes, and we're going to be talking to our expert, Grant Almquist, with Texas Apartment Pools. Grant is the owner of Texas Apartment Pool Services, a full-time swimming pool maintenance and repair company. TAPS is a family-owned and operated business with more than 20 years in the Houston aquatics industry. They offer customized repair and maintenance services for pools, waterfalls, fountains, and lazy rivers. No job is too big, and they can also help with your supplies. As an HAA CPO instructor, Grant has a wealth of knowledge in all things pool and pool maintenance. So we're very happy to welcome Grant with us today. Welcome, Grant.
Hello, thank you.
Okay, so I know that Howard had, for those of you that were able to take part in the legal lowdown that Howard just did, he had a lot of information about new pool codes. So we're going to kind of dive into that in a little bit more detail and kind of get that expert take on what all that means. So to get started, can you tell us some of the biggest changes that will affect the apartment industry with those codes?
One of the largest changes we see is this year's the requirement for the pools to be under the direction of a person with a CPO or a light certification. In the past, that was not required for Class C pools, which is the class that apartment pools do fall under. But starting January 1st, that was enacted. So
that started January 1st of this year?
Correct.
Okay. And so just to clarify, you mentioned this, a Class C pool would all of our apartment communities would qualify as a Class C pool. So when we're talking about that, that would include any multifamily?
Correct.
Okay, super. So let's get a little bit more specific. What requirements about the requirements for all Class C pools to be under CPO? Are there any variances to that rule?
So the way the code reads is that you can have more than one person in charge or over that CPO over more than one body of water. So if you have say a regional person regional maintenance guy who's in charge of 5 properties, he can, if he's got a CPO, he is allowed to cover those 5 properties. He must have his certifications posted and ready for inspectors to see and be readily available at all times for questions or concerns from the property or the inspector. If he shows up and wants to speak to that person, they must be available to talk.
Okay.
Another variance, the code also reads, it lists, if you read it, it lists different certifications that are available out there. There's 3 or 4. But it also at the bottom says any, how's it worded? Any certification offered through a governmental agency, it's kind of how it reads. The city of Dallas requires an MPO, a manager of pool operations, every 2 years. And that goes over how the city of Dallas wants you to run your pool. It's not a national certification. So there was some question there whether that would satisfy that. And I spoke with Katie Moore in Austin via email about this, and she clarified that it does not meet the requirement. So they're allowed to require that in order to get your permit through the city, but it doesn't meet the requirement through the state.
Okay, so CPO would be this a state certification, but some local municipalities may have their own requirements above and beyond that CPO requirement.
Correct.
So you need to really make sure and know what your local areas require. And then you mentioned about the regional maintenance, or somebody regionally, how far would that cover? Could that?
There's really there's no guidance to that. I would say keep it reasonable. So I wouldn't, as for an example, I wouldn't have your national maintenance guy over all your pools. That seems to be a little far reaching, but having your regional maintenance guy, if he's watching after a handful of pools, if he's able to be available to all of those bodies of water when needed, that would probably be fine. It's going to be up to the individual companies how they want to run that.
Okay, and this you may have kind of already said that, or answer this in its own way, but I know back in the early kind of days of CPO, some of the managers would get certified. Is that I mean, does it really matter who's certified as long as? It does
not.
Okay.
As long as somebody is responsible for the pool that has a certification.
Okay. What about, there was also some changes or talk about the frequency of water testing. So what are we supposed to know about that specifically?
So in the past, you're supposed to check your water twice a day, every day. That has been upped to 3 times a day. For any pool that doesn't have any type of automatic chemical injection system. There are some vendors out there that offer that. If you have, and going from there, it breaks it down more and more and more depending on how complex your system is. So if you've got a really fancy system that can give you your readings virtually, or not virtually, but via computer. So it gives you a real-time reading of your pool because it's got the wireless capability. You only have to check your water once a week, physically, as long as you have that information for that equipment ready to go.
Because if the equipment's monitoring it, it's going to do the readings that fulfill that requirement. Then
Correct.
if that's the case, and you would just want to do an actual reading, like through the person, like on site, just once a week.
Correct. That's how the code reads. If you have real-time monitoring via a Wi-Fi system where you can just pull up your computer and look at your readings, you only have to physically check your water once a week. So those are the 2 extremes. You've got no chemical monitoring at all, 3 times a day, every day. And you've got Wi-Fi that you can pull up your readings all the time, whenever you want. You got to physically check it once a week. And then depending on the complexity of your system, it changes in between those 2 points.
And so what about if you don't have that that capability? You just would have to physically check it 3 times?
Correct.
Every day, even on the weekends?
Even on the weekends.
Okay, so what if we don't have that automatic system now and we want to get that automatic system? Like, how easy is that? Or
they're easy to install. It's the price tag scares people.
Okay, interesting. But what happens if you risk reward? What happens if you don't have the proper readings when requested or whatever? What would be the impact if you don't?
That is up to the inspector. Now, the inspector, when they walk on, they should be asking for your chemical logs. A lot of times they don't. If they do and you don't have them, I'm sure there's some type of fine or infraction that can be levied. But I haven't heard of that in the past.
Okay. So then there was also talk about colored lights in the pool. What can you tell us there?
So in the before this year, the rule is basically you need to be able to see the bottom of the floor clearly from the deck. The 100% of the floor had to be illuminated. And the problem with the colored lights in that interpretation is that some of the colors create shadows and don't illuminate 100% of the floor. It might color the water, but the darker the color, the less effective it is at brightening up the pool, obviously. The new code, the way it reads is colored lights are only allowed if you have the correct number of white lights in the pool with them. So you'd have to, if your pool needs 8 white lights to illuminate 100% of the floor, you have to have those 8 white lights, and then you can install a separate set of color lights if you want color, which I've seen on new builds. That's being done already.
So then the color just comes in like on top of, just to kind of create that illusion. It's not what would be really powering, if you will, being able to see the.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting, but you're seeing that a lot in the new construction, just color lights in general?
I'm seeing there's a few high rises downtown that have white lights and a completely separate set of colored lights when they want to have that illumination as well.
Gotcha. And they can just interchange the colors, I guess. Is that how it works? Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, what about signage? Required signage. What do we need to know to make sure we're staying up to code with signage? I feel like it's changing. I'm always
it changed a lot. They added a lot of new signs. So you now have to have a line on your sign that states, don't change a diaper within so many feet of the pool and stuff like that. I had a document, let me see if I can find it, but it goes over everything that's required. There's one saying if you've had, for lack of a better term, stomach problems in the last 2 weeks, don't get in the water. They're getting pretty specific.
That's crazy. Okay, well, I guess what's unfortunate is people probably had those problems, and now it means we have to tell people that
Correct.
things you would think make sense. Now all of a sudden we have to alert people. Okay, so anything, so just more detailed. Because the base is, I guess, is the same stuff required that was there from before. Anything changed as far as prior, or is it just additional?
It's additional. They did change. So I know there was a concern, especially in multifamily, with the verbiage of the sign that said people under a certain age can't get in the water because there was a concern with the verbiage of saying children or what have you. Now the state has it to where it must read persons under the age of 14. So the state has set the age for you. Persons under the age of 14 must not be in the pool without adult supervision.
Oh, well,
so that has been set for you now.
Under 14, persons under 14.
So that's one example of a previous requirement that was there that they have gotten more specific on. A lot of the changes in the height of the size of the letters, some of those have changed as well.
So it may not be as simple as just adding an additional sign, maybe with the new elements. We really got to kind of take a look at what we have out there in general and apply these new regulations.
If you were to buy a new sign for every new requirement, you would buy 4 or 5 new signs.
Oh goodness. Okay. Okay. So then what about? We've talked about water testing and colored lights and signage. What about this is interesting. I'm really curious to see what this means. Why is it important for pool gates the doors to open away from the pool?
That helps control access. So when you've got a family walking up to the pool and they've got mom and dad with their hands full with all the floaties and the bags for the day and the cooler, and they have 3 little ones with them, if the gate opens inward, it's a lot easier for them to push that gate open and for those kids just to take off.
Oh.
If it opens outward, then you got to do the whole grab your stuff, kind of back up as the gate opens, and you can control that access easier as it opens outwards than if it opens in.
That makes sense, and that's a small kind of change that might not even I certainly wouldn't have thought of. So that's interesting, and I'm sure that does help a lot. Okay, so what about plaster colors.
Okay, that one got interesting. So just kind of like the lights, it all depends on how easy it is to see the floor of the pool. So in the past, it's always been, you know, if you throw a black disc into the water and it sits on the floor, can you see that disc from about 5 feet back from the pool edge? If you couldn't see it, your plaster was too dark, it wasn't compliant. Now it's saying, and it's going by something called a Munsell color value scale. Honestly, I have no idea what that is. I've looked them up and don't really have any clue on how to read them, but any new plaster or new build, the plaster, it states in the code, interior surfaces and finishes shall be at least a 6.5 on the Munsell color value scale. You probably have to contact a design person to help you figure out what color shade that is.
Okay, so it's pretty, it would be obvious for new construction, but what if I have a property that just needs to be, the plaster needs to be redone? Would that
It's the same thing.
Same thing would apply? Okay. And then what, I guess, let me check with Morgan before I continue. Morgan, did you have any questions from the audience?
No, I do not have any questions from the audience, but you guys, if you do have any questions about anything related to the new pool code, even if it wasn't mentioned in this webinar right now, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat or on Facebook Live.
So is there anything else that maybe we didn't get to cover about the code that you think would be helpful, or anything else just in general that you're seeing out there that would be helpful to share with our audience, Grant?
The one thing I am seeing, and it's concerning because it is a safety hazard, especially on new builds. And I hate to be the person to have to bring this up whenever I'm on site, because it's a brand new pool. You know, it all just got done, or new plaster or what have you. But people are installing glass tile for their trim tile on this edge of your steps and your benches. Now, the way the state code reads is that the surface of the pool, the steps and the benches must be non-skid. Now, that's going to translate over to anything on the surface has to be non-skid. Glass tile is not non-skid.
Right.
So if you have installers out there installing glass tile as your trim tile, you're out of code, and that's a pretty large liability concern because that's where you walk. So it's like stepping on a line of ice when you step into the pool, if you step on that stripe. And I've brought this up to a number of providers who install the plaster, and their response is, well, that's what the customer picked. And my response back to them is, well, it's your job to make sure what they pick is right.
Right.
So that's the one thing I'm seeing a lot of lately, especially with new builds. And just be careful when you're picking your tile. You can have all the fancy color tile you want on your water line, on your water feature, stuff like that. But if it's on your steps and benches, make sure whatever you have installed is a non-skid tile.
Non-skid, so not glass or anything. Got it. I'm making that note. And then I know that we are approaching, I know there's a big cold weather burst that's coming our way. Is there anything that we need to know about that to make sure that we keep our pools working in tip-top shape?
Well, your pool pumps and spa pumps that are filter pumps have to run 24 hours a day. So you don't have to worry about, you're not going to freeze water that's going 70 gallons a minute in a 2-inch pipe. That's going to be fine. Where properties run into problems, if you have features or even your spa jet pumps that only run when the 15-minute timer is turned on, we're getting what's considered a hard freeze. It's supposed to be 18 degrees Monday morning, and that's going to last for a while. So that's when you run into problems with your hose bibs, your backflow preventers on your fill lines and your sprinkler lines, and also with your pool equipment. Any pump that's not running, that's exposed to the elements, make sure those pumps are running.
Okay. So was there anything else, Morgan? Thank you, Grant, by the way. There was really timely advice there. Glad that we were able to get that, because that would be not fun to have to deal with. So yeah, anything else, Morgan? I wanted to touch base with you.
Yeah. So, and this, I think you might have just mentioned one commonly missed code item, but are there any other commonly missed code items that we need to educate our members on?
Just make sure you have the right gauges and meters in the pump room on your plumbing. Those are required so the inspector can calculate flow rates and everything and make sure those are right if they want to. Labeling of your equipment is also a requirement. Make sure that's there. And then again, just the signs, make sure you've got all the proper signs, especially now with all the new ones that are required.
And where can people find, I'm sure most people who have worked on site for a while would know this, but where do people purchase or get these signs?
So in speaking with distributors and manufacturers, there's not yet a plan of when the new verbiage is going to be available to purchase on a standard pool sign. So most people are just going to their preferred sign vendor and having them either update their existing signs or make a new one or just make a new sign with all the new regulations on it. It's kind of how the property wants to play it.
Okay. And then another question I had was in terms of the pools being required to be overseen by someone who has a CPO credential, is that could a supplier partner also be that person or?
Yes, so supplier, if you have somebody taking care of your pool, a pool company that comes and services it, whether as long as they're on site and they show up, if they have a CPO, they can be your CPO person as long as they're willing to provide you with their certification and to be available to talk whenever needed.
Okay.
Good question. It's good to know.
I think that might be helpful. And Kyle Brown, a HAA past president, does have a question. Do the new signs have to be installed now or only when the signs are replaced?
The signs need to be updated as soon as possible. That is not something that would be considered grandfathered because it's not going to be considered to be undue burden to update your signs.
Good question. And what about, I know this was something that Howard kind of mentioned, and I thought it was a little strange. There's something about, having a phone by the pool, which I didn't realize was still a requirement considering we all have cell phones. But there was an update, something along the lines of it can be a cell phone as long as it's like permanently stationed somewhere near the pool. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you don't have any way of getting a phone to the pool, you can use a cell phone, but it's got to be pretty much locked in place and have power running to it at all times. So the battery can't be able to die. So yes, that is an option. How viable that is going to be up to the property because phones are one of the easiest things to vandalize. If somebody sees a cell phone sitting there, it's probably going to disappear like your ring buoy.
Right. Probably smart to just have the old school landline cord situation somewhere near the pool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's all the questions that we came up with. And there's no more questions in the chat or Q&A or even on Facebook. But, Grant, this is a topic that is going to keep coming up. And we appreciate your time and your expertise on this subject. Grant also wrote an article for Abode on everything that we talked about today. So this video will not only get posted to YouTube for you guys to watch later, to have your colleagues or your other teammates watch, but there will also be an article on this in the upcoming Abode. So look out for that. And TAA is also going to be doing a webinar on pools as well, and that will be on February 11th and February 16th. So check out TAA's website to register for that. And next session for Expert Exchange will be on the new apartment tour. So definitely register for that. And with that, thank you again, Grant, so much for your time and expertise today. Thank you, Betsy, as always, for hosting. And we will see all of you guys on February 24th, I believe. Yes, February 24th. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks, Grant.
Bye-bye.